عن قطع علاقاتها الدبلوماسية مع إيران.
إلى لغة الإنصار السود وانقلاب السادة بالأيام.
Good afternoon, you're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yumna Naufal and these are today's top stories. The head of the Future Parliamentary Bloc, MP Fouad Senoura, condemns on behalf of the March 14 Alliance the release of former Minister Michel Smeha from prison. Calling sieges in Syria a barbaric tactic, the United Nations demands immediate access to besieged towns to deliver aid to civilians facing starvation. And international sanctions on Iran are to be lifted when the UN nuclear agency declares Tehran has complied with an agreement to scale back its nuclear program, the words of Iran's foreign minister. The head of the Future Parliamentary Bloc, MP Fouad Senoura, is condemning, on behalf of the March 14 Alliance, the release of former Minister Michel Smeha from prison, saying that the military's court ruling is an insult to the Lebanese people. He said the Lebanese people will not accept a new phase of foreign hegemony and will reject a military court that pardons traitors. He made his remarks after a March 14 delegation paid a visit to the tombs of slain former Premier Rafiq Hariri and Internal Security Forces Intelligence Bureau Chief Wissam al-Hassan in downtown Beirut. Senoura remarked that the military tribunal's ruling justifies the formation of the Special Tribunal for Lebanon because the Lebanese justice system, he says, has failed. Justice Minister Ashraf Rifi is making a request before Cabinet to refer the trial of former Minister Michel Smeha to the Judicial Council in wake of his release from jail, despite the damning evidence against him and his involvement in bombing plots in Lebanon. This is according to a report printed in An-Nahar Daily. He said he will also submit to Cabinet a draft law that he prepared to eliminate extraordinary trials and instead call for the establishment of judicial powers concerned with significant and terrorist crimes. The minister added that he has given the orders to prepare a memo to refer Smeha's case to the Judicial Council for a retrial by judges that are trusted by the Lebanese people. Smeha was released from jail on Thursday after being arrested in 2012 after he was caught red-handed smuggling explosives from Syria for the purpose of carrying out bombings and assassinations in Lebanon. Calling sieges in Syria a barbaric tactic, the United Nations is demanding immediate access to besieged towns to deliver aid to civilians facing starvation. It said that it stopped acting as though such suffering is simply inevitable. In the last year, the Syrian regime did not even respond to more than half of the UN requests to deliver assistance across conflict lines. According to the UN, if the regime approves these outstanding requests, 1.4 million would receive assistance.
In recent days, the Syrian town of Madaya has shocked the world's conscience with harrowing images of malnutrition and hunger. Regrettably, siege and starvation as a weapon of war has become routine and systematic in Syria, with devastating consequences for civilians. The barbarity of this tactic cannot be overstated. By besieging civilian towns and villages, the parties to the conflict have launched a vicious war on ordinary men, women, and children with callous indifference for their lives, health, and well-being. A siege that denies people access to the basic necessities of life is unlawful, unacceptable, and unconscionable. There can be no reason or rationale, nor explanation or excuse for preventing aid from reaching people in need. It is a grave violation of international law, and it must stop immediately. The primary responsibility for this suffering lies with the party maintaining a siege. It is, however, shared by those that conduct military activities in or from populated areas, thereby using civilians as shields and placing them in harm's way. As the Secretary General pointed out in a statement to the General Assembly yesterday, all sides, including the Syrian government, which has the primary responsibility to protect the Syrian people, are committing atrocious acts prohibited under international humanitarian law.
Madaya is just the tip of the iceberg. This tragic town represents just 10% of besieged areas and only 1% of hard-to-reach areas in Syria. Many of these other areas have not been visited by the United Nations since October. If this status quo continues, these images that we've seen from Madaya could be repeated many, many times over. Mr. President, we cannot allow this to happen. With the eyes of the world on us today, let us send a clear message to the warring parties. Starving civilians as a method of warfare is inhuman, unacceptable, and prohibited under international humanitarian law.
International sanctions on Iran will be lifted when the United Nations Nuclear Agency declares Tehran has compiled with an agreement to scale back its nuclear program, according to Iran's foreign minister. Foreign Minister Jawad Zarif arrived in Vienna, the headquarters of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN body expected to issue a report triggering the lifting of sanctions imposed by the United Nations, the United States, and the European Union. Sanctions have cut off a nation of nearly 80 million from the global financial system, drastically reduced the exports of a major oil producer, and imposed severe economic hardship on ordinary Iranians. Most will be lifted immediately. The report, if issued, would mark the consummation of the July 14, 2015 nuclear agreement. Under the deal, Iran agreed to shrink its atomic program in exchange for the lifting of some sanctions, which would allow billions of dollars of investments to flow into the country. Coming up next, President Barack Obama meets YouTube's most popular sensations. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching the 4:20 o'clock news here on Future Television. A drone attack believed to have been carried out by U.S. forces killed 3 suspected al-Qaeda members traveling in a car in southeastern Yemen, according to security sources. Tribesmen said a missile struck the vehicle in the Rafat region, killing 3. A local security official said they were al-Qaeda fighters. The United States is the only country known to operate armed drones over Yemen. It has kept up strikes on militants during months of fighting between pro-government forces and Shia Houthi rebels who control the capital. Amnesty International charged that the Saudi-led coalition backing the Yemeni government had renewed its use of cluster bombs during a January airstrike on Sana'a that killed a 16-year-old boy. The coalition has denied using such ammunition in its anti-Houthi attacks on the Yemeni capital. Security forces in Burkina Faso ended a siege at a hotel and a restaurant that were stormed by al-Qaeda-linked gunmen, killing 3 jihadists and freeing 126 people, but another assault was ongoing at a second hotel nearby. A security source said at least 22 people were killed in the jihadist assaults on the Burkinabe capital's 4-star Splendid Hotel and the nearby Cappuccino restaurant, which are popular with UN staff and foreigners. 33 of the 126 people freed from the Splendid Hotel by Burkinabe troops backed by French special forces were wounded. 20 of them have been confirmed dead, but the toll could rise further, as Compaoré told earlier in the night that firefighters had seen 10 bodies on the terrace of the restaurant. Earlier on Saturday, a fire raged at the main entrance of the 147-room hotel in Ouagadougou, and screams could be heard from inside. David Bowie's last album, Black Star, released just days before his death from cancer last weekend, soared to the top of the British album charts as fans bought or streamed over 500,000 of his records. With 3 compilations of his best hits among the top 20 albums and classics like Hunky Dory and The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust, Bowie dominated the first UK list since his death at the age of 69 last Sunday. Black Star, which won some of the best critical reviews of his career, becomes Bowie's 10th chart-topping record. It was described by his record producer as a parting gift for his fans, thousands of whom have been flocking to a memorial to the singer in his hometown of London. Bowie will be honored with a tribute at next month's Brit Awards, as well as a memorial concert at New York's Carnegie Hall on March 31st. U.S. President Barack Obama picked his favorite Star Wars character, described the characteristics of the element Obamium, and showed off his pocket keepsakes in interviews with YouTube stars Destin Sandlin, Ingrid Nielsen, and Adande Thorne. Take a look.
Have you seen the new Star Wars?
I have not.
You have not? Okay, so my audience wants to know, we had the YouTube Ask Obama hashtag.
Yes.
What is your favorite Star Wars movie? 1 through 6, since you haven't seen
Number 1. I still remember when I saw it.
That's the wrong answer, Mr. President.
I was like 14, 15, and I went to the Cinerama Theater right around the corner from my house.
Okay, number 4. Okay, you saved it. You clutched it. Okay,
Yeah.
So if you had to pick from one of these Star Wars characters, who would you be?
Well, I got to go with Han Solo. You know, he's a little bit of a rebel.
If you had to pick a pair of pants for your dog, A or B?
No, you got to go with this.
This one?
Yeah, this, I think.
This is your final answer? You don't want to phone a friend?
It's a little too conservative.
Too extra, okay.
Yeah, a little too much.
And the last one.
Too much fabric.
All right, so if Drake and Kendrick Lamar got in a rap battle, who do you think would win?
Got to go with Kendrick. I'm just saying. I think Drake is an outstanding entertainer, but Kendrick, his lyrics, his last album was outstanding.
Excellent, all right.
Best album, I think, last year.
Thanks so much for your time, Mr. President. Excellent.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
If there was an element named after you, Obamium. You've never been asked this, I hope.
I have never been asked this.
Yes. Right? So the question is, this is fantastic. So what would you want the physical properties?
What would be the elements? What would be the
characteristics? Is the element.
What would be the characteristics of Obamium?
That's right. That's right.
That's interesting. Well, you know, I would want it to be stable.
Excellent.
I would want it
very noble. So maybe noble gas.
Yes.
Okay.
I would want it to be a catalyst, but one that didn't get too hot or too cold.
Okay. Fantastic.
And hopefully it would be one that was useful to humanity, that we could actually use. You know, and wasn't just some shiny object that,
I appreciate that
somebody
sir.
liked.
I appreciate you going down that path with me.
I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time, sir.
I'm going to be tuning in.
We asked you if you could bring something from your home, the White House, to talk about today and tell me why it's meaningful.
This is rosary beads that Pope Francis gave me.
Wow.
That obviously means a lot to me because I so admire him, and it makes me think about, you know, peace and you know, promoting understanding and ethical behavior. This is a little Buddha that a Buddhist monk gave me.
Wow.
This is a lucky poker chip that's metal.
Oh wow, that's really cool.
That this biker gave me. He was like bald and he had like a big handlebar mustache and a bunch of tats. And this is when I was in Iowa in 2007. So he said, "This is my lucky poker chip. You can have it." And then I got this is a Hindu little statuette of the monkey god Hanuman that a woman gave me. And I've got a Coptic cross. This is from Ethiopia.
Wow.
So I've got a whole bunch of this stuff. If I feel tired or I feel discouraged sometimes, I can kind of reach into my pocket and I say, yeah, that's something, you know, that's something I can overcome because somebody gave me this privilege to work on these issues that are going to affect them. I better get back to work.
That's really touching.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing those items
Absolutely.
with me. I loved it.
I had more than one, though. I hope you don't mind.
No, not at all. The more the better. Thank you so much, Mr. President.
I really enjoyed it.
I loved this.
Thank you.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. The head of the Future Parliamentary Bloc, MP Fouad Senoura, condemns on behalf of the March for Cheat Alliance the release of former Minister Michel Smeha from prison. Calling sieges in Syria a barbaric tactic, the United Nations demands immediate access to besieged towns to deliver aid to civilians facing starvation. And international sanctions on Iran will be lifted when the UN nuclear agency declares Tehran has compiled with an agreement to scale back its nuclear program. Those are your Saturday headlines live on Future Television. Catch us again tomorrow for all the latest. I'm Yumna Naufal signing off. Good night.
تعلن عن قطع علاقاتها الدبلوماسية مع إيران.
بلغة انصار السود وانقلاب السادة بالأيام.